I must have been 5 or 6. Mum, am I adopted? And she froze. She literally froze. She's like, don't be so silly. Of course you're not. Of course you're not. But I think children have a sense.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. Welcome to episode 112. I am in quite a mood the last couple of days. I've had so many family changes. I'm raising now a 4th child this last month. I have 3 biological, and just a lot has been going on in my family life. And so this led me a couple days ago to, I don't know if this was a great idea, but it led me to open up Google and start Googling my biological family, my biological father, who I've never met. And then, of course, I went down the rabbit hole of looking up my half-sister and my half-brother, who have never responded or acknowledged me in 2.5 years. And if you can't tell, that hurt just a little bit. So apparently I wanted to hurt myself a little bit more a couple days ago as I looked at all their most recent holiday photos. We just had Thanksgiving and Christmas, and they posted all these beautiful photos of my nieces and nephews who I've never met and have gotten so big in the last 2.5 years. And I'm like pinching and zooming in on the pictures. And sure enough, I see pictures of my biological father. And I've, had maybe 2 or 3 phone calls with him and just a few awkward, cold emails, and then silence. Pretty much, I guess, rejection. So I'm looking at his face, and he has 2 photos on Google. They're like headshots, professional headshots. And I have stared at those photos hundreds, if not thousands of times. So I'm just devouring these new photos. And he looks so frail. He looks so old. I mean, he's gray. And so now, you guys, I'm been filled with fear. A man who hasn't shown any interest in meeting me or my beautiful children, his grandkids. Now all I want to do is get in my car and drive 10 hours and show up at his doorstep and just and force him to meet me. Just please look me in the face, please, because I'm afraid the next time I Google him, I'm going to find an obituary. And that's where my head's been. I'm certain it's not healthy. I'm sure it's a terrible idea to just show up at this man's house. But the few times I've connected with him through phone or from email, he hasn't been kind. And would he still be that way if I were standing in front of him? And perhaps he would be. But I feel like I want to try. I feel I am in a mood. I am in a mood, you guys. I really am. And thanks for listening. I have a podcast. It's not mine. It's for NPEs, LDAs, and DCPs. On this podcast, we share our experiences. We talk about our feelings. We talk about what has happened to us, family dynamics. And that's where my headspace is at. And this might all completely change tomorrow. Who knows? So today, I think I just need to listen and be in my community of nodding heads and listen to another NPE share their story and their experience and what's going on with them. So That's a really weird intro. But Kiera, hi, are you there?
Hi, Lily. Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Kiera. It's nice to talk to you.
It's nice to talk to you also, and thank you for sharing what you've just shared. It sounds like it's been a heck of a week for you.
It has, and I know we were talking today about, oh, we haven't done any prep, and I'm like, you don't have to. I'm sorry. I'm in a place today. I'm glad I have this on the schedule to talk to you.
A bit of diversion.
Right.
Yeah.
You sound you said you're from the UK. You sound Irish?
Definitely not. No,
I'm sorry.
No, not far from
British?
English. Not
English.
far from Manchester in the northwest.
Okay, and that is why we have such the big time difference. Well,
Yeah.
I have been speaking with a few Europeans lately, so I'm glad we fit this on our calendar today, even with the big time difference. Thank you so much.
And thank you for having me.
All right, Miss Kiera, we can start wherever, but I know nothing of your story, so tell me where you're from and what your family was like, and we'll kind of just have a conversation from that.
Sure. Where to begin? I live, like I said, not far from Manchester in northwest England. I've lived here all of my 46 years. My family were half English, half Scottish. And if I give you a bit of background on my mother's and my father's family, my mum's mum and dad came from Scotland. They moved to England for work just after the Second World War. And my mum was actually born in England, where her elder brother was born in Scotland during the wartime. Anyway, they relocated down here. Quite happy. And then, like, my gran found out she was expecting my mum, and that would have been 1950, 51. And they proceeded to, obviously, very happy occasion, and went to like the mother and baby classes, antenatal classes. And there she met a friend who was also expecting, and this actually turned out to be in the future, what would be my paternal grandmother. So the two grands became friends whilst expecting their respective babies. My mum was born in the March, followed by my uncle in the April. So there was 3-4 weeks between them. The pregnancies were very close together, but the two grands remained friends. Did that make sense?
Yeah, so it sounds like your grandmother also made a friend in this baby class. They were both pregnant, and then your mother was born, and this other baby was born.
The other baby was born. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So the two babies were born within weeks of each other, but the two remain friends and continued to socialise together, and husbands got to know one another, and they didn't live that far, like geographically, they lived in the same village. So the families grew up together, and my paternal grandmother had an older son. So as time went by, my mum and the older son, like I said, they grew up together, but they ended up getting together. And they ended up getting engaged and getting married. So the two families joined together then. So what had become friends then became family. So I am going to use the names. They're no longer here anymore. So my mother was Christina and my father was David. So they got married, and within a year of getting married, they had my older sister. And then 4 years later, I came along. 2 years later, my younger sister came along. The marriage wasn't happy. Even as a child, I could sense that. And my mum, from what I do remember, quite quickly developed a drinking problem, which affected their relationship. I think there was extramarital affairs on both sides. So I think they managed to limp along for 14 years or so. During the period of their, I suppose, the last few years of their marriage, they became friendly with another couple. And part of the reason why they broke up, or why their marriage ended, my mother and father's marriage ended, was my father was having an affair with the lady from this other couple who my mum was very friendly with. They were best friends. And so he left her for her best friend, basically. Within a year of leaving my mum, he'd married her best friend, who also had 3 daughters. So from a child's point of view, it was bad enough having your dad leaving the family home. For me, it was a double whammy to get replaced almost with version 2 very quickly, and not asked, not involved. It was very much, this is happening and you must accept it.
Oh, wow.
So that all that happened by the time I was 8. But up until being 8, and I've heard this so many times, and I'll hear it again, I just felt different. I'd look around and think, am I in the right family? Am I really meant to be here? I felt like a cuckoo in the nest. And I remember standing behind my mum. Her back was to me. She was at the kitchen window washing dishes. I said to her, I must have been 5 or 6. Mum, am I adopted? And she froze. She literally froze. She was like, don't be silly. Of course you're not. Of course you're not. But I think children have a sense, or at least this child did anyway, that there was something not right. It could have been the way that I was treated within the family, or the way that I just felt, I don't know, but there was something that just wasn't quite right. Go from age 8 to through the teens, I was actually diagnosed when I was just before my 5th birthday with ADHD, which I know is quite young, especially sort of like 1980, 81 to be diagnosed. And as such, it's always been part of me. I've never not known myself without it. And I think it's just not been that big a thing. There seems to be quite a lot around ADHD and neurodivergent in the media and social media, and there seems to be a lot at the moment. But it's always been part of me, and I'd reasoned it out as growing up, just thinking, well, it's because my needs weren't being met. And I think it was definitely part of it, not all of it, because I just went off the rails. My mum wasn't there. She was physically there, but opted out with her through her addiction. I was neglected emotionally, spiritually. It just wasn't there. If it hadn't have been for her mother and her father, I would have probably, along with my siblings, gone into care, ended up in the care system, or possibly been split up across the family, which was at one point mooted for us. And I think the suggestion was that my elder sister would go to our father, my younger sister would go to his mother and father, but I would stay where I was. And I was probably about 10 when that happened. So that was a bit, no? I don't understand why everybody else, the option is to leave, but I have to stay. If I'd have known what a red flag was then, that would have been a red flag.
Were you still raised by your mother? I realized she was emotionally unavailable, but did you still physically stay with her?
Yeah, we were all under the same roof. My dad left the home and signed it over to her, so we all stayed. The house that we lived in was actually the house that my gran and granddad moved into when they moved down from Scotland. My granddad got a job as a mill manager, so it was a tied property, and it was built specifically for managers of the mills. So they moved into that. So my mum was actually brought up in that house. And then when my mum and dad found out they were expecting me, they decided they needed a bigger house. So they bought them like mum and dad's house. So we were then brought up in the same house that my mum was brought up in. So it was her home. So when my dad left, he signed the house over to her, and we were all then under that roof with, like I said, my gran and granddad doing some of the upbringing as well. And if it hadn't have been for them, it would have been a very different story. It's not that we didn't see my dad. We did. We'd have access to him every 2 weeks, but that was always at his house with his new wife and his new family. So that was it was quite traumatic, really. That,
oh, terribly.
Yeah, yes, to not be able to come out of that environment and just spend any one-to-one time. I cannot even remember spending any one-to-one time with him as a child. There was always other people around, always other children around, because he was raising 2-3 other children as well as, well, it wasn't raising me, but he was raising somebody else's children as his own. So I just went off the rails completely from about age 14. I just went crazy. Got into an extremely abusive relationship with a boy. Well, I was 14, nearly 15, and he was 18, so he would be classed as a man in England.
Oh,
so yeah,
same here.
I ended up getting pregnant, to which he wasn't happy. It was physically abusive as well as verbally. It was just awful. And he'd took umbrage at my pregnancy, or the result of our unprotected sex, that he beat me that hard at 15 weeks pregnant that I lost the baby I was carrying. I was 15. Yeah. And I went back for more, because I was looking for love in all the wrong places. It's such a cliche when I look back now, and I know it is, but it was a really, really, really dark time. I was stealing. I was experimenting in drugs, but looking at my mum and thinking, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do what you're doing. So that, and I never really, I'm so glad that I had the forethought to think, you're actually giving me the vision of what not to do in life, and I don't want to do that. So that never really went very far at all. So I tried. I left school. Exams were okay, but not brilliant. And I ended up in a factory, working in a factory at about age 17. I just thought, what are you doing? What are you actually doing with your life? So I went to college, and I did sort of like a vocational qualification. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Started to socialise, and got a new boyfriend who was in the army. And I think he was stationed over in Bosnia at the time. So there was, again, I've heard this quite a lot on your podcasts about pre-internet days, pre-mobile phones. we used to write letters all the time when he was stationed. So I've missed a part out actually, and it is quite an important part. Preceding or around the time that I decided to go to college, my mum decided to seek treatment for her alcohol addiction and ended up going to a residential treatment centre when I was 17. So she left myself at 17 and my 15-year-old sister. I had to care for her at that time, which I have completely unequipped for, no skill. I couldn't hardly look after myself. But she went to residential treatment, and that lasted, I would say, 12, 16 weeks. She followed the 12-step program. Seemed to work. She got sober. So much so that I think she wanted to give back a little bit to those that were just starting their journey, that she decided to go on to secondary treatment. And this involved her moving even further away from home, but becoming, for want of a better word, like a house mother. So she was working with young people with addictions. So she had to decant her room at her primary treatment place and bring out home all her belongings, and she just put it into one of the bedrooms at home. And off she went to go and start this secondary treatment. So I'm now at home, still on my own, writing letters. And one particular evening, I ran out of paper. And I'd remembered that my mum had brought home files. And it must have been, I think in 12 steps, I don't know that much about it, but I think you have to write your life story and you have to address certain parts of the things that you've done, or the things that you feel not so great about. So I remember seeing a lot of paper. So I was like, okay, right, well, I can write to my boyfriend now, I've got paper. So I opened the files, and the files were her life story, were the background that she'd given to her counsellors. So what's anybody going to do? Well, I know what I did, and I read it, and I read it, and I read it. It was quite intriguing. I found out quite a lot about my mum that I didn't know. So I picked up her life story and proceeded to read about the how she met and married my dad, and had my sister. And now, bearing in mind, they were probably only 18, 19 when they both got married, so they're very, very young. And as I was reading her story, she'd put down that she started to have an affair because my father was having an affair. And I think the words, because these papers are long gone. This is such a long time ago. But I just remember reading, and to this day, and I had to turn over the page, I still don't know who the father of my second baby is. So I read that, and I carried on reading. I'm like, what have I actually just read there? So I went back, got a bit more context, read it again, and to this day, I still don't know who the father of my second baby is. And I was like, that's me. She's talking about me. And my world just fell away from underneath me. I was in that house completely on my own, nobody with me, no support network, no nothing. And that was how I found out that the man I'd considered my father for 18 years wasn't my dad.
What a terrible way to find out. Oh my gosh, it must have been shocking to read that.
It was awful. It was awful. And I don't know whether there's ever a good way to find that out. This was all before ancestry, DNA tests. And I suppose, had she not gone into AA and this treatment program, she wouldn't have wrote that. And I may never have known. But that's how I found out. It was cataclysmic. But within hours, things started to sort of slot into place. I rang her almost immediately. Was screaming down the phone at her. And she got one of the other counsellors that she was working with to drive her like 4 hours back from where she was staying. And she was extremely apologetic. But the overriding thing that I can remember her saying to me was, you were never meant to know. You were never meant to find out. Which didn't really help, because by that point, I suppose in her mind, the cat was out the bag. But and then she went back to counselling, doing what she was doing in a secondary treatment, and left me with it. And at 17, 18, and emotionally immature, especially in the environment I've been brought up in, and being delivered, for all intents and purposes, a poison chalice. What do I do with that? So I thought, well, the only other person I can speak to now is my dad. I wonder if he knows, So I went to see him, and he knew. He knew as well.
Oh.
Yeah. I remember sitting on his bedroom floor upstairs, just absolutely breaking down, and him saying to me, I am 99% sure that you are not mine. But when I found out that your mum was pregnant, which in his words was almost like an immaculate conception because they weren't having sex, he said, I knew you weren't mine, but I made the promise that I would raise you as my own. And I thought, well, I can't speak for him because he's no longer here, and that's the promise that he made. But as the end user, I never felt that. I never felt like he raised me as his own, because I always felt different and I was always treated differently, quite overtly at times. So I then proceeded to ask, well, who else knows? And he said, well, my mum and dad know. So your paternal grandparents, your mum and dad's, your mum's mum and dad know. My new wife knows. So basically every single adult around me, while I'm tootling along, falling off the rails, trying to pull myself up by my bootstraps, every single one of them knew that I wasn't David's child. And I think that, more than anything, destroyed a faith in family for me.
Mm-hmm.
That everybody around me had just been lying, barefaced, and nobody seemed to care. It was just, well, it doesn't change anything. He said he'd be your dad, so he is your dad, and just crack on now. And that was that. I'd wanted to know more, so I went back to my mum, asked her, and she said, oh yeah, I'll tell you all about it. I'll tell you about the person that I think is your dad, because without the context, you just end up, well, I ended up going down all sorts of different avenues in my mind, thinking one night stand, it could have been anything. I just didn't know. And then you think, well, what about family history? What about medical history? What about everything that I knew was my truth is now no longer my truth? If that isn't my family, then what is my family? And why would you lie? So these are all the questions that I had for her. And she readily agreed to meet with me and a close friend who we used to call Auntie and my grandmother. And they got me in a room, and if we call it gaslighting now, the term I used was a kangaroo court. I was told to not say anything to anybody. I was never meant to know. I should never have found out. It's not my responsibility. It was my fault for finding out because I'd gone snooping where I shouldn't have gone snooping. This is what curiosity does. All these types of really toxic things that basically said if you approach anybody or say anything to anybody about this, you're going to hurt my feelings, you're going to hurt your mum's feelings, you're going to detract from your mum's like sober journey. I'd been handed. It's like I'd become this custodian. I've been told that you know this custodian, this huge responsibility, and not only are we now going to blame you for it, we're also going to tell you that you can't do anything. And Lily, I didn't do anything about it. I sat on that knowledge for 23 years and didn't do anything. And in that period of 23 years, you grow up. I met a wonderful man who's now my husband. I had a family of my own, and I was honest with them because, as far as I was concerned, it was gospel. It was the truth. You know what? Why else? Why else was everybody believing it? Of course, it was true. I couldn't see. Like my elder sister and younger sister look quite similar. I always look different. We physically look the same, like with similar height, similar colouring, but facially very different. I was always told that I took after my mum's side of the family, not my father's side. That was drummed into me since being a dinky dot. So I just didn't do anything. I left it. What I did do, the one thing I did do was I wouldn't blame myself. I couldn't blame myself. I wasn't responsible for how I got here, but what I was responsible of what I did with that information. Now, my mum did say who she thought was my biological father. I did similar to what you were saying at the beginning, went on to Facebook and other social media sites and found pictures of him and zoomed in and looked for familiarities, looked for, have I got his nose? Have I got his hairline? You know, have I got my hands the same shape? Do I look like his children? Do his children look like me? That could be my brother, that could be my sister, they could be my nieces and nephews. And I found out where he lived. I found out his wife's name, but because I'd been given that responsibility, I chose not to go and knock on his door because although he knew my mum was expecting me, his children didn't and his wife didn't. And I thought, well, without any solid proof or without it in black and white writing in front of me, I'm not going to go and inflict on somebody or on a whole family something that's been inflicted on me. And I've had a real hard time trying to navigate my place in the world after having the carpet pulled from underneath me. And I didn't want to do that to anybody else.
Did you say that he knew you existed? He knew your mother got pregnant?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the affair was quite long standing, and the idea was this was 1974, so we're going way back. The idea was for them to leave their pet spouses and go away together. My mum taking my elder sister with her. as they went off, and that was the plan. But then she found out she was expecting, so she was like, "What do I do?" It's the 1970s. It was a different world. I think women had less financial choices, or at least my mum did anyway. And my mum took advice. So I think she went to family planning clinics, and she said that she was going to take 3 pieces of advice, and it would have been the best of 2. Like about 2 out of 3 would be the decision she'd go with. And the first one told her to keep strong, keep the baby and pass it off as her husband's. The second one told her to have a termination. And the third one, which I think was the family planning clinic, told her to keep the baby. And my mum actually said to me, if the third lady had told me to have a termination, you wouldn't be here. So she'd gone back to tell her squeeze, I suppose, her side squeeze, that she was going to keep the baby, stay with the husband, and pass me off as his. And that's what she did. That's what they did. They all did it.
It's such that's such a huge level of betrayal when you finally realize not only did they know, and your biological parents, but that other family members also knew about this.
It was almost like a collusion, and
right?
very, very undermining to me as a person. And I've worked through it because it was such a long time ago, and everybody that was involved, like from those generations, they've since died. So I can't have a dialogue with anybody anymore because it's done. That they've gone. I had my first child the late 1990s, and then found out I was expecting a second child in year 2000 in May, and my mum ended up drinking again, and her father died. My grandfather died on the 4th of January, and she died 3 weeks later when I was 5 months pregnant. She died through her alcoholism. And that was the end of that, of both of those chapters. And one by one, other grandparents died, till it was just my dad, and I've always called him my dad because there hasn't been, and won't ever be anybody else to have that title, because he has always been around, and he is my dad. But I got to the point where I thought, well, my children both know. I didn't want secrets. I thought I'd felt like being told you weren't ever meant to know. It was, well, you've given me that responsibility, and it's what I choose to do with it. I chose to tell my children, so that I didn't want to lie to them, and I didn't want them to grow up and then find out at a later date and feel in any way like I did. And it's my story. It was my story then, and I chose to share it, and I spoke to people about it. It was always common knowledge within my own household. Siblings, as far as I can tell, there doesn't seem to be a great deal of comprehension or understanding as to the effect. It's been, well, it doesn't change anything. What difference does it make? It doesn't make any difference to me, without any real understanding of what difference it may have made, or would make, or continues to have on me. But I did get to the point where, when I started to see DNA kits become more readily available, that I thought, that might be something that's worth exploring. I'd spoke to my dad about different things, about the man that I thought was my boy, the man my mother told me was my biological father. That there was always that open dialogue with my dad, and he said, whatever I can do to help, I will. So I asked him if he would take a DNA test. And this was in 2016. Yeah. So I went over to him, and he was working in like a chapel at the time, working on his church. And I remember we both did the cheek swabs and put it in, and it was almost like it was a formality. It was like we just need to get this done, and then we can tick that box, and then I can go and speak to whoever I need to go and speak to get answers, because I just, at that point, I wanted answers. Everybody had grown up. He was the only one left alive. The people that I was told I would hurt were no longer alive. So it was my choice. I was doing it for me at that point. So the test went in, and less than a week they came back, and I just remember having my phone on me, and I'm like, oh, it's come in. I put the password in and opened it, and when you get that saying that your legs go from underneath you, it's never happened to me before or since, but it happened to me on that day, because the test results came back that he was 99.999% that he was my dad. So after all that time, from 18 to 41, he was actually my dad. And we'd all believed that he wasn't.
Oh, no.
And I cried and cried and cried. I cried for everything that I'd lost, everything that he'd lost, every missed opportunity. And everybody that it mattered, or not that it didn't matter to him, I know it did, but for everybody else that it mattered to, they all died believing that. And it was never true. None of it was ever true. And I had to try and wrap my head around that then, that I'd lived a lie, albeit not realising it, for the first 18 years of my life. Then from 18 years to 41 thinking, this is the truth now, this is the correct version. Now I understand why I felt the way that I did. Now I understand why I was treated the way that I was.
Mm-hmm.
To then be told, no, you've been looking for family elsewhere when that was always your family. And that hurt. I don't know whether it hurt as much, more, or the same, but it was definitely on a level of pain and anguish, because it was just it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for him as well. Heartbreaking for my dad, that he felt he'd been lied to. I'd since had a conversation with my dad's widow. My dad died last year. And I'd asked her, how did he react when I rang him? And she said he was angry. He was angry. And I understand him being angry. I wasn't angry. I was just so sad. Because it would have been easier. It would have been easier all round if it'd have come back and said there was 99% chance of him not being. But he was. He is, and he was. And it was too late. It was too late for me. I can't speak for him, but it was too late for me.
Mm-hmm.
The change in me had happened, and there was no going back from that. So although I know other NPEs get answers that they might, I don't know whether that's the right way of saying it. They will get answers, but then that opens up a whole other set of questions. I got an answer and almost didn't have any questions, but I was ready to have. I had all the questions ready, and I didn't get that opportunity because it just went. It was a complete curveball, a massive curveball.
I certainly wasn't expecting that.
No.
That your birth certificate father is your biological father, but he was never led to believe that, as were many other family members.
Mm. The one thing that I can take some solace in is that at least we knew, and he died knowing. There wasn't, he was 99% sure that I wasn't, like he said to me originally, but there must have always been that 1% there for him. He knew that I was his. Now, whether I can't begin to understand how that must have made him feel, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I can only deal with the way that it's made me feel, and it's been traumatic on me. Again, rock my world. It just took me back to those feelings of being that emotionally immature 18-year-old again, but this time nobody being around. Well, I've got a very supportive family that I've created, but everybody else that should have been answerable had gone. So I didn't even have that opportunity to, shake my fist at anybody. And I've just had to work through it. And I suppose to drag it close up to present day, I've made changes. I changed my birth name. The name that I was given was not a name that I would have chose. So I chose my own name. And that's the name that I use today. And I'm sure if there is anybody hearing what I'm saying, that gave me, it gave me me. My name isn't too far away from the name that I was originally given when I was born, but it gave me me. It gave me that sense of self. Another thing it's had a real effect on is my relationship with my siblings and their children, to the point now where I am completely non-contact with every single member of my family of origin. And that's through choice. That's through my own journey, my own mental health, and keeping it that way. Because yes, it was extremely traumatic news, but I've worked through it and I've accepted it, and I've learned to work through the loss and grieve the loss of the relationship that I may have had with my father. And I'm now having to deal with the grief of losing him physically as a person, because that's not even a year ago that happened. So yeah.
I'm
that,
sorry.
Oh, thank you. That's my story, Lily.
Oh, Kiera, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry about your father's loss and all the betrayal and loss of trust you've had along the way. It's you rebuilding that, just learning how to retrust yourself. Do you even trust yourself? That's that is so sad, and I'm glad you live your truth now with your family.
Yes, yeah, and that is that crystallized inside me that I'm the key and I am the answer. That my children need to know the truth, and they need to see me delivering the truth and speaking the truth and living the truth. And that's what I do for them daily. And they are absolutely fantastic. They are brilliant children. And between myself and the dad, we're so ever so proud of them. And That's what matters. That's it. When I look back at my 18-year-old, 17-year-old self saying that I don't want to do what she did, and I suppose I don't want to do what he did, I've not. I've parented well in the face of much adversity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's what I hear with so many NPEs is they say I live in honesty. We don't keep family secrets. I show my children love, breaking all of these,
Yes.
right? That's not what's so important to us. That seems to be a common, very important theme.
Yeah. And I quite like being in that club. I like being there. Yeah.
Me too. Yes. Kiera, thank you for sharing with me today. We will respect your privacy. We're not going to give out and contact information for you. But if anyone ever passes along anything to me for episode 112, Kiera's story, I'll forward that along to you.
Thank you.
Privately.
Thank you for taking the time to listen and giving me the opportunity to speak my truth.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.